Welcome to Anews. I'm Omer Taslim, and you're watching Turkey's Diplomacy. Tensions are once again rising in the Middle East, from renewed clashes in Syria's Suwayda province to Israeli airstrikes drawing international backlash. As ceasefire talks stall in Gaza and fears of a wider regional conflict grow, we'll discuss if the region is headed towards a deeper crisis or fragile calm. Joining me on the program today are Daily Sabah's editorial coordinator, Dr. Mehmet Çelik, and international relations professor, Dr. Ufuk Necat Taşçı from the Çanakkale University.
Syrian President Ahmad al-Sharaa said that the Druze is an integral part of Syria and denounced Israel's actions as sowing division. Al-Sharaa spoke after days of deadly clashes between Druze armed groups and Bedouin fighters that left dozens dead.
كما أخص في كلمتي هذه أهلنا من الدروز الذين هم جزء أصيل من نسيج هذا الوطن. إن سوريا لن تكون أبدا مكانا للتقسيم أو التفتيت أو زرع الفتن بين أبنائها. نؤكد لكم أن حماية حقوقكم وحريتكم هي من أولوياتنا، وأننا نرفض أي مسعى يهدف لجركم إلى طرف خارجي أو لإحداث انقسام داخل صفوفنا. إننا جميعا شركاء في هذه الأرض، ولن نسمح لأي فئة كانت أن تشوه هذه الصورة الجميلة التي تعبر عن سوريا وتنوعها.
Al-Sharaa spoke in an address aired on state television after Israel launched airstrikes in the heart of Damascus.
فنحن أبناء هذه الأرض، والأقدر على تجاوز كل محاولات الكيان الإسرائيلي الرامية إلى تمزيقنا، وأصلب من أن تزعزع عزيمتنا بفتن مفتعلة. نحن أبناء سوريا، نعرف جيدا من يحاول جرنا إلى الحرب ومن يسعى إلى تقسيمنا، ولن نعطيهم الفرصة بأن يورطوا شعبنا في حرب يرغبون في إشعالها على أرضنا. حرب لا هدف لها سوى تفتيت وطننا وتشتيت جهودنا نحو الفوضى والدمار. فسوريا ليست ساحة تجارب للمؤامرات الخارجية ولا مكانا لتنفيذ أطماع الآخرين على حساب دماء أطفالنا ونسائنا.
Syria also announced that its military had begun withdrawing from the southern province of Suwayda following heavy clashes, Israeli airstrikes on Damascus, and a United States call for all sides to de-escalate tensions in the majority Druze region.
Welcome back to the program. Dr. Mehmet Çelik, Daily Sabah's editorial coordinator. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Omar.
Dr. Mehmet, yesterday we saw Israel attacking Syria. Israel attacked the defense ministry building, and there were attacks in the vicinity as well. There were some harsh attacks. Around three people have been killed and dozens have been wounded. Now, Mehmet, how is Israel justifying these strikes? Do you think that it's actually protecting the Druze community, or is it looking for a power balance change in the region?
Well, to simply answer your question, Omar, the aim of Israel, Israel's aim for Syria, for the region, is instability. Now, when we look at Syria specifically and the tensions in the past few days, they are claiming that the Druze community needs to be protected by Israel against Syrian current regime. Now, this is just to put it very, in very vague terms, obviously, and to put it in a very simple context. Now, when we look at what Israel is doing in the region, beginning with the genocide in Gaza, they want to expand not only territorially, but not only in terms of political influence, but in terms of expansion politically as well. So what they want to do is they want to have leverage over different processes around the country, around the region. They want to have, for example, leverage over the YPG terrorist organization in northern Syria. They want to have leverage over the Druze community in the south of Syria. Why? Because they want to see a weak Syria in terms of administration, in terms of the political authority, in terms of the state, but they also want to see a Syria that is fragmented, that a Syria that has different sectarian or ethnic-based divisions so that it can actually be controlled much easier in terms of when they want to expand their territory into Syria, when they want to annex new areas like Golan Heights, if they want to have new occupation. So it makes it easier for them by promising different ethnic or sectarian communities within Syria that they will back them in their fight for an autonomy or fight for some sort of special status within Syria. Now, this is something that the Syrian government, of course, the interim government, has rejected, and they say they will not allow for that to happen. As fragmentation and division or the given one community and autonomy in Syria will basically open the Pandora's box for Syrian regime. What I mean by that is Syria is very ethnically diverse in terms of different religious sects. It's diverse. It has a diverse composition. If Syrian government is seen as one that will have to compromise or will give some room for that debate or discussion or the chance of an autonomy, then others will follow suit. Other communities will follow suit. So that demand from either the YPG or the Druze in Syria, which is backed by the Netanyahu's war cabinet, if that is, if there is a compromise made by Syrian regime, I think it will lead to further instability within Syria. And we always said after December 8th revolution, we said Syria's rebuilding phase will be very fragile, and specifically how the state will control the demands from different communities. Now, this is an internal equation that the Syrian administration had to deal with. But the other and more important is that following the December 8th revolution in Syria, right after Assad fled the country, we saw that Israel bombed all the military equipment, all military zones, all air systems of the Syrian government or Syrian state. So military, they had basically put them in a situation where they cannot effectively counter in case there is an airstrike, in case there is an occupation or invasion. Now, the militarily, of course, this weakened the Syria as a state. So what it makes, well, I mean, Israel is in a very good position to know that they cannot fight, obviously, Syrian regime cannot fight Israel. So for that reason, they're able to bomb literally Damascus and government buildings. One of the attacks, airstrikes, fell somewhere very near to presidential palace in Syria. The ultimate aim is not only to put divisions within Syria, but to territorially divide also Syrian state, the country as we call it, Syrian Republic. But what that will mean for the region is, I think, something that is more dangerous. That will lead to further, and you know, I put it on my top of my list, further humanitarian crisis. Syria is just recovering from that, beginning to recover from that 14 years of war that, you know, not only Türkiye suffered significantly when it comes to the refugee influx, but also European countries had to deal with that too. So I think that is something that needs to be calculated by those who have leverage over Syria from the European side or from the United States. Now we see that, of course, you know, there is this discrepancy between Netanyahu government and the Trump administration. In terms of end goal, I'm not sure if they have differences, but in terms of the method, so far the Trump administration does not want to see further escalations in the region, and this is why Trump was very highly praising himself for ending the 12-day war with Iran. This is why Trump says, you know, I want to see Syria rebuild itself and give them a chance for rebuilding. And this is why he lifted the sanctions. But Netanyahu government seems like they're in a rush. So I think in terms of the end game, they want to see a secure Israel. But Israel is conducting this preemptive operations to secure its own territory, as it is calling it. But it is doing that at the expense of destabilizing the whole region, targeting all the peoples in the region. I mean, they targeted Lebanon, they targeted Iran, they have been targeting Syria since day one. I mean, at the expense of everything around themselves, they're saying that we are going to, we're doing this to ensure security of our own security. But how can you establish security when you are destabilizing the region, when you are bombing and attacking everyone that is around you?
Mehmet, do you think that Netanyahu is yet again going against Donald Trump's policies? Because Donald Trump was the one who removed sanctions on Syria, and then the European followed suit and removed sanctions on Syria. So now if Donald Trump has approved the government in Syria, then why is Israel continuing to attack Syria? Do you think that they have any differences right now, Donald Trump and Netanyahu? Well,
in terms of the, I think the methods and how much room Trump wants to give Netanyahu, I think there is a difference in approach there. Netanyahu wants to see things unfold very quickly to secure his own position within Israel. I think that's something that's a little shaky for himself. In terms of international community, everyone condemns what Netanyahu government has been doing, including some of the very strong supporters of Netanyahu, like Germany, for example, when it comes to what they are doing in Gaza or even their so-called plan for Rafah and rebuilding a city there with tents, like a new concentration camp, basically. So in that sense, I think Netanyahu is very aggressive, that even towards a leader or towards a U.S. president like Trump himself, who says, this administration will be best friend of Israel. He said that. He said that this will be the best administration that will be backing Israel and supporting Israel. But even then, at the White House press conference, in the first one, we saw that he was telling him, you have to be reasonable in Syria. And what he is doing so far is against that common sense that Trump drew for Netanyahu. I think it is against that being reasonable in Syria, because not only will this cause instability, the end goal, but it will also, I think, lead to a further regional conflict that Trump would definitely not want, as he wants to focus on Asia Pacific.
Mehmet, now that there is a ceasefire in place, do you think that this is going to last? And what factors do you think could, eliminate this ceasefire from, between these two sides? Do you think that there could be something upcoming in the next few days? Because we've seen what happened in Gaza. There was a ceasefire.
Almost no ceasefire that Netanyahu's war cabinet has signed or agreed with has been sustainable, or none of them have held so far. So this is, of course, very fragile in Syria as well. So whether the ceasefire will hold will depend on how much Israel's going to put pressure on the Druze community, as led by Hikmet al-Hajri on the one side, because not all the Druze actually support this invasion by Israel, or this. They don't want to see escalation of tensions between the Druze community and the Syrian government. Not all of them agree. So we cannot say all the Druze in Syria or in the region are actually agreeing, because Lebanon has a different position. The Druze community in Lebanon has not a very similar position with the ones within Syria. So in that sense, it is very fragile. But I think if Trump administration wants this ceasefire to hold, it will need to put some stronger pressure on Netanyahu to make sure that this tension does not escalate to further instability within Syria, but also broader region. I think the more dangerous scenario for Trump will be if, for example, the tensions escalate in a way that different groups demand autonomy and different, due to these demands, if different tensions emerge and lead to very armed conflict and a civil war in Syria again, other actors will have to intervene at that time.
Mehmet, I want to ask you about the Turkish response, but before that, I want to talk to you about something else. You know the Jeffrey Epstein files, right? Now, reporters in the U.S. have been asking Donald Trump, when are they going to be released? Where is the list? What's happening? And he's been pushing those questions away. Now, and we've also heard in the last few days that there's a report, and it's not a new report, we've seen this pop up occasionally, that Jeffrey Epstein was working with Mossad. So do you think that's a reason why all of these world leaders, they're so afraid of not supporting Israel, because Israel might have something that they could show to the world?
Do you mean supporting Israel?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm not very familiar, to be honest, with that file. But nevertheless, one thing is very clear for everyone around the world. Just an average Joe on the street is very knowledgeable when it comes to the financial power of the Israeli lobbies in different countries. So simply, even with that, I think Israel is able to put leverage or put pressure on different leaders around the world to make sure that their economy is functioning well. Otherwise, when we look at the U.S., for example, I mean, top billionaires are from the Zionist lobby. When that is the case, it's not easy for any U.S. president to even if we don't try to explain why from a religious or from a theological coherence between the Zionists and the evangelicals or Christian Zionists, and how the U.S. presidents have been aligned with that position. But when it comes to U.S. foreign policy, there's different priorities for Middle East, for example. So ensuring Israel's security, ensuring the interests are protected in terms of energy and trade routes, etc., but also containing Russia and Iran on the other hand, and having leverage over some of the Arab states. In that sense, of course, Israel is able to put a very strong pressure on the U.S. government. When it comes to Europe, it has also different historic realities. Something like Holocaust happened at the heart of European continent. So there is that in-depthness from the European leaders towards Israel, where they cannot, in addition to the lobbies within Europe, where they cannot put themselves in a position to confront Israel.
Mehmet, also, now let's talk about Hakan Fidan. He said that there's one-sided destabilization in the region and the world needs to curb those Israeli actions. Now, how will these attacks impact Turkey's policies for Syria?
Well, Turkey's policy for Syria has, from day one, from even before Assad fell, actually, since the beginning of the civil war in 2011, there's a few red lines or few positions that have been very constant. One of them is to ensure Syria's territorial integrity protected. This has not changed. The other is to minimize or to eliminate the threat coming from PKK's Syria offshoot or any other terror groups from northern Syria against Turkish sovereignty or security or safety of its citizens. So that's number two. The other, after the war started in Syria, to ensure that Syrian people that are living in Turkey, they're able to safely and voluntarily return to their country. So that rebuilding is always supported by Turkey. That has been also the case, because even when Assad was in charge, Turkey always advocated for a political transition. Turkey did not want a fragmented Syria. And this is the case. So this is why this is the case when Israel is trying to put divisions among different peoples in Syria. This is why Turkey has been conducting a very strong diplomatic push, and they have been in communication with different actors from the region, but also with the United States and European leaders, or European diplomats, so that that pressure could be applied on Israel. The end game for Turkey is to ensure peace, security, and prosperity for Syria. And without minimizing the effects of these ethnic or sectarian tensions, it is not easy to establish security. Without security, you cannot rebuild economically, you cannot rebuild socially, you cannot rebuild the state institutionally. For that reason, I think the biggest priority for Turkey is to make sure that Israel does not further instigate any tensions within Syria.
Mehmet, but there are also protests within Israel. Inside Israel, we've been seeing public protests. People are asking the government to get the hostages back from the occupied Gaza Strip, but that's not happening. There's no ceasefire as well. So do you think that these protests are impacting Netanyahu's strategy in the occupied Gaza Strip? I don't think so, because if that would have been the case, the hostages would have been back in Israel. So do you think that these
you've answered the question, Omar. So I think it makes it, if any of that would have applied any pressure, or would Netanyahu be affected by those pressures, things would have changed. I think things not only change for the worse, but Netanyahu becomes more aggressive towards the wider region even, not just in Gaza. I mean, look at the West Bank, for example, within Syria. Look at their aim to take over basically the Al-Aqsa compound, and, the Jerusalem or Al-Quds is a big, I think, something that we rarely talk about, but it needs to be talked about. Why? Because the ultimate aim is to basically take over that too. But in terms of the pressures, Netanyahu is facing a lot of pressures within, due to these corruption charges, due to the situation of the hostages that are still remaining in Hamas's hand, due to, I think, some of these wider region steps. Right now, I think, the government's, the composition of the government is also a little bit shaky. How, some parties are leaving, how sustainable that is for Netanyahu. This is something that we will see in the coming days, but he's doing his best to stay in power, and this is why he's expanding continuously. This is why he's becoming aggressive continuously. This is why he has turned Israel into a killing machine or a terror state, as Turkey has described it, for its region. This is how the region and the wider world, people around the world, do not look at Israel the same way as they did before October 7. I think this is one of the biggest calculations, biggest issue that Israelis must think about in applying pressure on Netanyahu to stop doing what he has been conducting in Gaza and the genocide in Gaza and the wider region. This puts not only peoples of the region in danger, and it doesn't not only turn into a bloodshed and tears for the people's region where Israel attacks, but also I think for the future of Israelis, this is something that they need to think about. Where is this person dragging us into? Well, is he really bringing us to a safer Israel, or is he going to really positively establish an image for us around the world, or is he damaging us? Is he isolating us from the region? Is he isolating us from the international community? I think this is something that the Israelis, everyone that is backing Netanyahu's war cabinet must think about. I think that it is time for them to realize that this theological interpretations and theologically motivated moves for the wider region are not only going to bring instability for region, but also it isolates Israel from the international community. And this is something that will not be very helpful for their own future.
Mehmet, thanks for that analysis. We'll be right back with you. Thank you. Israel's coalition government is undergoing strain after an ultra-Orthodox party quit over a military draft dispute, raising the risk of early elections and complicating ceasefire talks with Hamas.
A key partner of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says it is pulling out of his coalition government. Now, this decision by the United Torah Judaism Party does not mean that the government is going to collapse right away, but it does complicate Netanyahu's ability to govern and especially to negotiate a ceasefire agreement with Hamas in the Gaza Strip. The UTJ is an ultra-Orthodox religious party, and it objects to efforts in Parliament to end exemptions from military service given to young religious men. This system of exemptions is controversial in Israel, and it has grown increasingly controversial during the past nearly 2 years while the country is at war. Netanyahu has about 48 hours to try to seek some sort of compromise with the UTJ, but if they do pull out of the government, he will be left with a narrow majority in Parliament. That means that he will be even more reliant on hardline partners who oppose major concessions to Hamas in these ongoing ceasefire talks. That makes it more difficult for Netanyahu to maneuver in these negotiations. Now, Parliament is set to go on recess in the coming weeks. That should buy Netanyahu a little bit of time to negotiate and try to shore up this coalition. But in the coming months, we're looking at a period of more instability and a growing likelihood that Israel could be plunged into early elections.
Welcome back to the program. Joining us now is Dr. Ufuk Najat Tashi from the Çanakkale University. Dr. Ufuk, welcome to the program.
Hello, Mr. Umar. It's my privilege to be with you today.
Dr. Ufuk, we've been seeing the ongoing developments in the occupied Gaza Strip, and the latest reports that have arrived are that over 900 people have been killed at aid distribution centers. How are you looking at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and what are your views about this organization?
So we should be common when it comes to this, because we know it is simply autocracy. So the suffering of the Palestinian people has hit its peak. So in the past few months, it has just been upgraded to another level, the suffering caused by the Israeli government, despite the reaction of the entire world. It's, the government of Netanyahu insists on just pushing thousands and hundreds of thousands of Palestinians into hunger. So it is entirely against international law and humanitarian law, if we speak, technically. But in terms of humanity, it is not acceptable, because we know Trump is not really happy with what Israel is now doing in Gaza. So it's simply preventing aid to be distributed to innocent people of Gaza. So it's of course not acceptable, but it shows us what sort of strategies governments like Netanyahu would apply in case of war in the region as well. So there are some dramatic scenes coming out from Gaza, and preventing aid is something totally against the main rules of international relations, international law. So we know the main, regulatory laws of international community, starting from Hague to Geneva Convention, New York type, contracts of international community, they have all been violated by Israel in the past 2 years, just likewise in the past few decades. But nobody can dare to stop Israeli government, and everybody is refraining from preventing this government to stop this, tragedy. But if it moves on like this, what I see is Israel will be isolated from international community, even if not from politics. The collective, mercy of humanity is damaged by the recent actions of Israeli government. So, which will pave the way for Israel to be isolated from the international community, and it will simply show it like a rogue state. This is what we call in international relations, and it's ironic how Israel has, with the support of United States, have used these terms with many other countries, but it has directly become a rogue state of the world. So I think it's not ironic. It is painful to see innocent people suffering to get a single part of food and aid from international organizations. I have no words to describe this.
Ufuk, also the Israeli government is pushing for its plans to displace Palestinians to Rafah, where they're saying there's a so-called humanitarian city that's being built on top of the ruins of Rafah. Do you think if that plan goes ahead, what's going to be the international reaction? Do you think that the Israeli government is going to force Palestinians into that humanitarian city, that so-called humanitarian city?
So it should have taken place a far while ago, because we know it is part of a systematic genocide, because even though we have been speaking about almost the last 2 years, we know Israel has been applying the same strategy since its establishment. So when Israel established on 14th of May in 1948, it had already displaced half of the Palestinian population in its lands. And since then, we have not seen any serious measures taken against Israeli governments in the past few decades. So while speaking about war, we have some simple terms. Even though they are old, they are simply based on protecting civilians. And it simply forbids forcefully displacing innocent people of any particular country. But if you don't apply it to any particular country, how come you're going to speak about international system or United Nations? So for now, everybody knows, everybody around the world, I think the people around the world have been convinced that there is no such international system, because it only works in favor of one country and its backers. So it is simply it has simply become a tool for hiding the crimes of Israel and its backers. So it's not sustainable anymore. And if it is not stopped, nobody will have any kind of trust in so-called international system.
Mehmet, I want to bring you back into the conversation. Now, we've been seeing that ceasefire talks in Qatar have been stalling. Hamas has demanded Israel's complete withdrawal, and Israel says that in a post-war Gaza, Hamas would not exist. Now, Mehmet, what are the key obstacles to achieving a sustainable ceasefire right now?
Well, I think Israel's willingness to actually establish or agree with the other side, or come to terms with the other side for a sustainable ceasefire. Israel does not want ceasefire with Hamas. Israel does not want ceasefire. Israel does not want to see peace in Gaza. Israel does not want to stop its expansion. I think this is quite simple. If it wanted ceasefire, if it wanted exchange of hostages, if it wanted to even get rid of Hamas, I think, as a group, I think the terms would have been agreed by now. If the aim was to minimize Hamas's effect from running in Gaza or Palestine or other areas, I think this would have been discussed. This would have been agreed with, regardless of how how much they are trying to dictate that. But I think the ultimate aim for Israel, when it is to depopulate Gaza from Palestinians, when it is to literally take over the whole occupied territories, be it Gaza, West Bank, or East Jerusalem, etc., the 1967 borders means nothing right now, right? And we see that map that Mr. Erdogan at several international platform it showed, where we see year by year how much occupation expands into Palestinian territory. If this is taking place over the years, the aim of Israel, we can see that it is not to come to an agreement where Israelis and Palestinians would be living side by side. The aim is to depopulate. I think that when we were just talking with Dr. Ufuk about the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. I have said it previously in our previous shows that the aim of this program seems like it is to make targeting civilians much easier as they gather them in an area and literally killing them. With the Rafah you were talking about, it is not, if it is not a concentration camp like project, what is it to put this many people in such a small area and without any infrastructure. I mean, even at this very basic needs, if it doesn't have these simple needs that needs in terms of infrastructure, it will lead to disease. It will lead to security concerns. It will lead to hunger again. I mean, you're literally putting 600,000 people in a very small area with anything built for them. This is only creating instability, and it's an aim or a project to further push away people from the Gazan territory. If the ceasefire wanted to be established, it could have been established. There have been many times where they agreed, but Israel broke them every time. The aim is not to find peace. The aim is to depopulate Palestinian territory from the Palestinian people. And you know, when it comes to Rafah situation, why should they leave other parts of Gaza? I think this is the biggest question that needs to be asked. Why are you dictating on a people to leave their homes, to leave their lands, and you are saying, I'm going to occupy here? You know, that big video that circulated on social media a couple years ago, when one of the illegal settlers come in and it says to one of the Palestinian residents, it says, if I don't, you know, steal, if I don't come to your house and take over it, somebody else will. That mentality does not seek ceasefire. That mentality does not seek peace or a solution to this problem that has been going on since over 7 decades. When that is the case, talking about ceasefire, talking about small programs for humanitarian aid, talking about relocating Palestinians becomes nonsense. So I think ceasefire, if the Israelis want, if Israeli side wants a sustainable ceasefire, they have to come with sustainable terms. Otherwise, this conflict will continue until Israel eliminates, by the backing of the United States, eliminates every single Palestinian that exists.
Ufuk, you saw and you heard what Mehmet said, that Israel is not looking for peace. And if you look at the recent strikes in Yemen, Lebanon, and now Syria, do you think
Iran,
do you think that there is a significant chance of a wider regional war?
Yes, I think so, because I entirely support what Mehmet Bey said. But I would like to express one more thing. So we know there have been a good relationship between Southern Cypriot administration and Israel in the past almost 30 years. But 2 weeks ago, we saw an Israeli politician saying that Southern Cyprus is a promised land to Israelis. And even their one of the biggest allies, Southern Cypriots and the administration, they were concerned about this statement made by Israeli politician, which shows us that Israel's intention is not related to only Gaza. It wants to expand its borders, not around the region, but extending from Middle East to Eastern Mediterranean, maybe furthermore. So if that's why I have been telling on every single occasion that if it's not stopped, it will damage everyone, because we know Israel has no long-term alliances with any kind of countries, not just Muslim countries, but it can even violate every single agreement it has signed with Christian countries, other countries in the region. So we have also seen the people around the world, they have started realizing the fact, because I have seen too many videos from social media showing that Israeli tourists are being expelled from stores in Europe, around the world. And that's why at the beginning of our broadcast, I told you it is becoming an isolated country, because it has failed to convince the world that it is just simply working in favor of its so-called security. So it has failed to convince the world, and that's why it is direct against even U.S. foreign policy goals towards the region. You know why? Because we know since his first term, Trump has been seeking to expand Abraham Accords, the so-called Abraham Accords. But by having Iranian Revolutionary Guards and Netanyahu-like governments in the region, it will fail, and it will be fragile against China in the long term. So that's why Trump is trying to reach a balance. It's not because Trump does love Palestinian people or the countries in the region, but it is for the sake of its own foreign policy goals. So I'm not trying to create an image of an angel by taking Trump as an example, because we know he's not. But Trump, if he is wise, he knows he needs to stop, and they need to, particularly the American officials, they need to rebalance Israel. That's why I believe that there will be a change in Israeli government with some more clear, politicians, if we can call it so. So after changing Israeli politics, I think there will be a lot to come in terms of Abraham Accords. But with the existing government in Israel, nobody believes in Israel, and it is so-called innocent security aims.
Dr. Fiknadat Tashchi, thank you for that analysis. It was a pleasure having you on the program.
You're welcome. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Dr. Mehmet Çelik, thank you so much for being in the studio with us. That brings us to the end of our program. Thanks for joining us. Bye for now.